The Cardano Contributors League. What is this? So there is a challenge 7. In Fund 7, there's a challenge setting called Cardano Contributors League that, if voted in, would be a challenge in Fund 8. The Cardano Contributors League the idea is to help try and fund full-time contributors in the ecosystem to work on certain parts of the core ecosystem. And the whole idea and premise of this kind of challenge setting is it will help to maximize this contributors the impact. How can we really do everything we can to create the best environment so contributors can deliver the maximum impact they can? And in terms of an initial focus, Project Catalyst is perfect because it's the thing that IOG are pushing onto the community for them to work on themselves and for us to take over the soonest. And it's also the biggest area for a lot of change. So contributors working in this area of the ecosystem, in the whole of Cardano, can provide massive impact and massive value because Catalyst has massive potential. It just needs a really aligned, cohesive kind of workforce to make sure it kind of realizes that vision. So to understand the ecosystem, let's just kind of go over the kind of fundamentals. And in terms of the core process, we have this kind of proposal-based process where if I have a new idea to change the core ecosystem or any other ideas of DEXs or anything else in the system, I make a proposal and I'll create that. It'll get refined. I'll then finalize it. It'll go through to community advisors who assess it. Their assessments get reviewed. It then goes to the ADA holders who will then vote on which proposals to fund. Then the ones that are voted in will get rewarded. And then finally, whilst the funded proposals will start reporting their progress and KPIs against what they said they would do. So that's kind of like that overall kind of ecosystem flow. And in terms of goals, some really high level ones that we can list here that are pretty general and it's not exhaustive. There's could be much more specific and useful goals, but it's like some high level goals that you'd like to see in this ecosystem. You really want to have a high quality end user experience. So the community advisors, the proposers, the voters, when they go through that process, it has everything it needs to. It's very slick. It's very polished. It's a good process. It's like it's a process they want to do again, rather than it being very difficult to go through. And this leads to that second goal. If you want it to be like nice and easy to understand, that it has the documentation, it has the simplicity. It's not bloated. It's a clear and easy to understand kind of process. So it's very easy for me to go from being a complete newcomer to getting involved and becoming that advisor, that proposer, that voter, and going through that process. And then finally, a really good goal for this ecosystem to have is to make it easy for community to become contributors. So I could be a developer who comes in, and you want it to be the easiest possible for me to come in and become active in whatever part that benefits the ecosystem. So I want to get help with the auditing process or creating proposals or whatever process that the core ecosystem needs help with. I really enjoy the ecosystem. I want to try and help with it. How can we make that environment nice and easy for them? That's a really good goal, because the easier that is, the more talent you can kind of draw in that really kind of push the ecosystem forward. So with that in mind, let's look at some of this current process with proposals that we have, which is at the moment, the entirety of how we're going to do Project Catalyst is just this kind of proposal process. So some initial problems we have with it is it really is weak on alignment. So when you think of like the financial situation as, if I make a proposal in some challenge, the difference between me getting funded or not and working on this full time is whether this proposal gets funding. It's not on my potential impact as a person. It's on whether this solution idea that I've got here gets funded. So my financial incentives are to make sure this proposal gets funding, rather than making sure the best idea gets funded, or the best team, or this or that. For me, my incentive is to, my financial incentive is to make sure the thing that I'm attached to, this proposal that I create, gets funding, because that's a difference between whether I get any money or not. And as well as the proposal kind of process kind of doesn't incentivize collaboration. So if I'm getting funded to work on, let's say, a reporting and KPI tools for the core ecosystem process, then I'm not incentivized to go and help out and understand the other core parts of the ecosystem. I'm incentivized to make sure that single part is done and implemented. I don't necessarily, and also I'm not incentivized to bring other ideas into it. That person who works on that solution might still do that, but they're not incentivized to do it. As long as they complete what they said they would, then they have fulfilled the incentives that have been put in front of them, the environment. And the other potential issue here is this kind of, if you have different solutions to different teams working on core parts of the ecosystem, you have this massive potential for diverging implementations and processes. As if I'm just working on this this auditing and proposal, this kind of reporting process, then if I do something that's different than another core part of the ecosystem, it could be whether it's a data model, it could be APIs, it could be integrations, whatever it is, if I'm not fully aligned with what else is going on this kind of core part of this ecosystem, then diverging implementations make it more difficult for other contributors to come in and help, because you could be doing things in a completely different way, whether it's technology stack or kind of that data approach. If those things don't align, you have this massive potential for weak alignment and causing more friction. The next kind of massive problem is flexibility. So if I'm getting funded for a proposal, I'm now much less flexible to move into other areas, because I've been funded to solve that specific problem. Even though that might not be, that solution at the time could be a valid thing to work on, but it might not be the most highest impact thing in the ecosystem right now. It could be something to do with the community advisor. Something helping there could be has the biggest problems in the ecosystem. So attracting more talent there could be the most impactful thing. But because I've been funded in this area, I can't, for me to move there has, things to consider. So I have to then go into there, ask them if I can help that team. Is like, how am I going to get funded? How do I get involved? Because, if I don't execute on the thing I've been funded for, then it's unlikely I get funded again for that specific thing. So there's all these kind of risks and flexibility issues. And then what about changing requirements? If suddenly quantum computing becomes a really big deal, and for some reason Catalyst has to respond to that for whatever reason, if I'm stuck to this proposal, a solution idea, it's hard for me to suddenly move to that kind of new area of focus. That's like, this is a new problem we've got to solve it quite quickly. I should be able to move to that quite quickly. And by being attached to and funding that's to do with a solution, it's hard for me to allocate too much time there without risking, the incentive model that's been pushed in front of me. The third issue we face at the moment is also knowledge gaps. So as a proposer, if I'm working on a one or a few areas, then I can quite easily be siloed and not fully understand all of the other core things that happen in the ecosystem that are really important to understand. And that those can create those kind of alignment issues. And then when you look at community advisors, there's a massive potential, their incentive is to review assessments. For them to understand all of the core ecosystem kind of processes and tools, they need to understand those to a fairly decent degree to really understand whether the impact of this is, useful or not, or whether the prioritization is right. For them to make those decisions and thought and that review on the fly is very, very difficult. So it's got a high chance of not being as well informed as someone, a collective team who are working on it full time could kind of come to conclusion with. And then finally, voters are the least well informed, because they're not working on the nuances and intricacies of implementing and improving the Catalyst ecosystem. They are really pushing on their trust on the community advisors. So you have this kind of trickle effect of this, like, where the incentive is not there to fully comprehend all of the things that are needed to make well-informed decisions. These knowledge gaps are massive problems for really kind of deciding what's the key thing to work on and which things are higher priority than others. And then finally, we have complexity. So if I have to do some small changes here, this and that for things I'm working on, I've got to add in budgets and mapping out the exact time it's going to take and what that's going to cost. So you've got massive chance for budget inaccuracies. If I'm working on a few different proposals and solutions that are for these core ecosystem things, I then have scattered funding. Maybe it's me and one other person working on this thing, and then 3 people working on there, and then 4 people working in another area. Suddenly I've got to work out who for each of those proposals that's been funded, who gets what amount from each one. And so I've got to track all of those contributions and all that kind of complexity, and that just adds on all this kind of bloat and complexity to the process. And then finally, we have this kind of detailed proposal requirements, whether that's things like the milestones, the KPIs, the auditability, all of that side. And that's fine for some of these new, let's say it's a new DEX, these new projects that are coming in, and they're a completely separate process to the core kind of things in Cardano. They have their own kind of process and stuff that they can kind of justify. But for me to making small changes and kind of things within the core kind of ecosystem, that can be a very, very bloated process that kind of really slows down that rate of change, especially through like a 3 months with these kind of 3 months funding windows. So that is an overview of this kind of issues we're facing with the current process. Now let's look at the ways that people have been kind of things have been added that are looking to kind of improve the ecosystem for Project Catalyst specifically. So one of those is Catalyst Circle, and that was introduced to kind of help with this kind of problem sensing and prioritization and delegation of things that need to be done within the ecosystem. And how that works is the community basically elects community representatives to come into a kind of Catalyst Circle kind of group, and they meet on regular occurrences to kind of go through this kind of bringing to the forefront these problems, looking at which one is the most high priority, and then how those could kind of be solved. And the good things about this kind of Catalyst Circle process is it's going to be used as part of this kind of product workflow. So a kind of standard product workflow is you will take problems, look at prioritizing them, look at different solutions, and then take it through from problem through to like implementation of improving a product. So the good part of the Catalyst Circle is it does this first half of it. It kind of gets it through to the kind of suggesting solutions and starts to kind of delegate them out, which is good because you start to prioritize things, look at things that are actually relevant. The second thing that it's good for is flexibility. If a new problem comes in suddenly out of the blue that's really high priority for Catalyst, the Catalyst Circle can instantly start talking about it and start prioritizing it and looking at how, severity of that problem to understand it. So they're not tied to any kind of ideas. Some of the problems with Catalyst Circle, however, is it has limited outcomes. The Circle representatives aren't necessarily full-time in Catalyst, and they're also not the ones implementing the solutions. So the point of that they can maybe recommend solutions or how this could be solved, it then gets pushed to the community that then have to go through the same kind of proposal process or kind of do it off their own back kind of situation. So you still have this kind of a not complete product workflow kind of process that means the outcomes are limited. The second thing is lower commitment. Most of the Catalyst Circle members that are involved at the moment, most of them I think are full-time basically involved in Catalyst, but it's not a requirement. So having any lower commitment in the Catalyst Circle and only doing it part-time could be a risk to that process, because to really kind of understand the nuances of, let's say, changing the core ecosystem, you really need to understand the nuances of why certain decisions are made and why things are the way they are, to really kind of have a fully informed decision to guide that problem prioritization and kind of supporting all of that kind of workflow and product development. And then finally, we have complexity. How the Catalyst Circle kind of process is funded at the moment is this kind of proposal kind of process. It kind of still has to kind of go for all these kind of like distributing funds to individuals, saying who's got what, the accounting, the fine, all those kind of different sides are all kind of added to this process. So it adds that kind of bloat and complexity to a process that starts to look at some of the benefits of this kind of adding product workflow. So one of the other things that have been introduced recently that there is a challenge for in Fund 7, which is looking at rapid funding. And the idea of the rapid funding mechanisms is to look at how can we kind of increase the cadence of how fast people can get funding. Because at the moment, this kind of 3 month time window, if you miss it, is really kind of causes problems for kind of stifling innovation and certain smaller changes that might need to happen within the core ecosystem itself. And the real benefits to this kind of process is it's a nice, simple process. It's much faster to go through. So having some sort of simple process that's kind of fast to go through, kind of solve some of those issues that you kind of have with the proposal process. The kind of problems that we have with it, though, is that it still has this kind of proposal structure. It's kind of really focused on ideas and people coming forward with ideas on things that need to be done. And it kind of introduces this kind of governance complexity of who are the ones that are deciding who gets this funding. This requires quite a bit of thought, because again, like these kind of smaller, more localized kind of rapid funding problems need to have the right people involved for who, deciding who should get funding. The ADA holders, the general ADA holders, are not well positioned to have the capacity to understand the pros and cons of all these kind of smaller decisions. But this governance complexity is an issue to consider for this. So now moving on to the Contributors League, which is the idea of really focusing on these full-time contributors and how can we really maximize their alignment. And the real simple idea for Contributors League is to fund individuals rather than proposals. That is really the merit of it. And in the challenge, people would make proposals to say, here's where I'm going to focus my time and efforts to help the Project Catalyst ecosystem as the first kind of like focus area. And then people would vote on which of those proposals potential candidate contributors would get elected in. And the key kind of benefit of this is the full-time contributors are a really core kind of, whoever's working full-time in this core ecosystem has a massive influence on the rest of the kind of people who are the part-time contributors and the engaged community. And this diagram we have on this slide here is relevant to all of the previous kind of issues, situations we mentioned, the catalyst circle, the rapid funding proposals. All of them kind of fall in this kind of dynamic of there's people who are working full-time, there's people who are working part-time, and there's engaged community. What the Contributors League does really well is it really focuses on aligning those full-time contributors as much as possible. Now, the better you can do that, the easier it's going to be for these part-time contributors to get involved and understand what's going on. It's going to be much more easy for those engaged community members to vote and understand the problems and things that are going on within the ecosystem, because that is the alignment and the collaboration and understanding and transparency of this full-time contributors ripples out to everyone else. And the benefit of funding individuals to work in it, in the kind of Catalyst DAO per se, like this as an organization, is it really brings together these kind of benefits of the other kind of ideas as well. So in terms of the Catalyst Circle, it takes benefits from that because the contributors can do the same transparent meetings and processes that the Catalyst Circle does, but they take things through to implementation. You have full-time developers that are working on that. So it brings all those benefits, but actually completes the product development workflow, but still can have that same kind of full transparency. And in terms of the rapid funding side, is the full-time contributors can be allocated a funding pot, let's say a Catalyst DAO treasury, so that the full-time contributors, part-time contributors, and even the engaged community can be involved in voting who will receive these kind of like quick smaller amounts of money to kind of fulfill certain tasks or roles within the ecosystem. So having the full-time contributors really supports that kind of rapid funding process as well. In terms of objectives for the contributors, it's super simple. So their objective is to maximize their impact. And by having that kind of dynamic, it means that contributors are now not attached to ideas and proposals. They're super flexible. So if I am an analyst or somebody who wants to focus in product or something like that, I could then focus all of my time on just that specific skill area across all of the core ecosystem parts, whether that's the community advisor stuff, the voter, the proposal creation. For the Project Catalyst ecosystem, I can spend all of that time providing the maximum impact for how I would like to most spend my time or where I'm most skilled. So instead of me, let's say, doing that plus other things in a 1 or 2 solutions, because that's how I'm getting funding in a proposal, I'm then being able to have the flexibility to kind of decide and choose like what's the best way to, and the real kind of secondary benefit of that is then people who can kind of work kind of like across the core kind of parts become this really effective glue and adhesive to bring together everyone who is kind of working full time. Let's say there's a developer who is just spending all of their time on one specific tool. That's absolutely fine. But now they have this supporting active, whether it's people working in analysis or product or design or whatever areas that might be fully aware of the rest of the ecosystem, that then can bring in that consistency, can bring in that those opinions and thoughts and knowledge of everything else that's going in the core ecosystem to really bring it together. And that really aligns with some of these kind of overarching goals we want with a really high quality experience. So that kind of ability, the flexibility helps with this high alignment, which is kind of like that kind of second point there, where, because you have this kind of maximize impact as the objective, you then will then help create alignment with the processes, implementations, and all these kind of details that are massive problems with proposal process. And then finally, it really helps with this maximizing collaboration. So if I can showcase why, when I'm doing kind of progress reports as a contributor, I'm just basically showcasing what I've been working on. And if I can showcase that this collaboration has made some consistencies between whether it's design, implementation, product, and these things, I've added massive value to the ecosystem because now it's a slicker experience, or it's easier to use, it's easier to understand, whatever it is. Like if I'm bringing those things together, and then that provides impact. So I'm fulfilling the role of a contributor. So I think that's it for the contributors kind of league understanding. In terms of next steps, there is a proposal in Fund 7 for this challenge to go through to kind of start this kind of more aligned kind of full-time contributor process. There's a proposal and documentation I've linked in the description kind of below that you can have a look at. It goes into much more detail on things like the focus areas and how it could kind of work the contributors kind of league in this kind of first version. And if you have any feedback you want to give or any concern, anything like that, then Discord's just there. Please send it across and would love to hear your thoughts. But super excited to continue working on this, even if this isn't voted in Fund 7 for a reason. It's a key thing because I'm working on, and other people are working on, these kind of core ecosystem problems. It's a common thing that's coming up in my mind of just making sure everything that I'm working on is aligned with everyone else. So it's something that I will continue working on regardless of whether this is funded or not. But hopefully I've managed to persuade everyone that it's a potentially really, really good idea. So thank you for listening, everyone. That's everything for this one. Have a really good new year, and let's smash it for 2022, and catch you guys soon. See ya.